A few words about me. I'm Peter. This is my Twitter handle, so feel free to let me know your thoughts about the talk and about beacons in general. I'd love to hear about it. And this is my email, and I'm Technology Evangelist at Estimote. So yeah, really, if I were to say what this means is I basically teach beacons, right? I used to be a programmer myself, working for digital agencies, consulting companies, and now I pretty much do the same, but with beacons, right? Talking to big enterprises or individual developers, startups, which are only starting with beacons. So yeah, before we dive in, really technically, a few basics to basically get us started. First of all, a lot of stuff I'll be talking about is not Estimote specific, it's iBeacon, right? iBeacon is this protocol invented by Apple. You can really this is going to developers talk. How many programmers do we have in the room? Okay. So yeah, iBeacon is the protocol, and Estimote is, you could think of it as an implementation of the protocol, right? So this is some white paper with, hey, this is iBeacon, and we're actually doing it, right? And adding some additional stuff on top of it. So this is it. I'll try to flag whatever iBeacon or Estimote specific content I'll be talking about. And this slide, you've probably seen it on Dominica's in Dominica's presentation already. So this is basically all about beacon hardware. It's super simple. It's a Bluetooth radio wave that basically advertises every certain interval. Hey, I'm beacon number 7. Hey, I'm beacon number 7. And your smartphone can read this and do something about it, right? Hey, I'm in the vicinity of beacon number 7, which is probably the front desk, right? So let's do something about it, right? And here's the best practice number 1. I actually added it yesterday evening after talking to some guys during the speaker's dinner that implemented beacons that you'll hear from later on. How many of you have Bluetooth enabled in your phone? Yeah, not that many of you. And this is because especially people who the people who are using the first generation of smartphones still remember Bluetooth as this power-hungry thing you need to disable because it eats into your battery. So really, that's the first really basic challenge about beacons. You need to educate your users, the users of your application, that this is Bluetooth Smart. This is Bluetooth 4.0, also called Bluetooth Low Energy, and it's called Bluetooth Low Energy for a reason, right? It really doesn't eat into your battery life. So please don't disable it. So if you have an app and you have an onboarding process, something that's pretty common and considered a good practice right now, maybe make it part of your onboarding process, right? Check if Bluetooth is enabled. If not, let the user know to enable it and tell them that, hey, this won't eat into your battery life at all. So when I showed this slide with beacon, hey, I'm beacon number 7, I lied a little because it's not really number 7. It's actually those 3 kind of parts. So beacon ID is those 3 parts. The green one called the proximity UID, the longest one, and 2 smaller ones, which are called the major value and the minor value. And why is that? It's basically because it's designed to be hierarchical. So you can do something like that, for example, right? You can designate your proximity UID, this long part, to be, hey, those are all beacons installed in Estimote Museum, something like that. And then you can have a particular major number assigned to each wing of this museum, say northern wing, southern wing. And then the minor value will actually help you identify the particular beacon installed at a particular exhibit, right? So then you can do some cool stuff about it, and this is pretty important term that we'll be using later on that you need to know about if you want to do something with beacons. It's called beacon region, and you can think of it as a filter or a wildcard, regular expression, if you will. For beacons, so I can say hey, I'm looking for all beacons in my Estimote museum, right? So I'm looking for all beacons with this particular proximity UID, regardless of the major value, minor value. Or I can be looking for all beacons with a particular proximity UID because I'm looking for all beacons in the museum, and the major value because I'm looking for all beacons in the northern wing. Or I'm looking for this very particular one specific beacon, and then I need to provide all 3 values. That's the important part. This is something Dominika already mentioned, so I'll just blast through it. Beacons only send those IDs, right? We pretty often get like inquiries, hey, so those beacons, notifications, then can push some content to your phone. Where do I actually configure it, right? Where do I set that, hey, my beacon is actually front desk or something? Well, the answer is you don't. All you set up is like this, this ID part, proximity ID major minor, and it's up to your app to figure out like map this number into some actual content. And this can be on your smartphone, like hard-coded into your app. But it's probably a better idea to actually have it on some external server and download it from your app as you go. So that's, say, you add additional exhibit or you change something in your museum, you don't need to deploy another version of your app, go through like Apple review process and all that stuff. You just change some stuff on your server. So this is like the huge part of Beacon, like the whole content management system. So we really think of like beacons, sure, like it's a hardware kind of industry, but there is like a lot of software part of it, and that's why we like to call Estimote like really a software company, not necessarily a hardware company. Like the hardware part is easy. It's just, hey, I'm beacon number 7. That's it. Okay, so those were the basics, and now like let's dive into configuration. So like before, you probably designed your app already, right? I'm going to have those proximity IDs, majors, minors. Those will map to my museum. Those will map to like particular wings of the museum, and those will map to particular exhibits, all that stuff. Now, like we actually get to the hard part. We want to deploy those beacons, and we want to make sure that everything works correctly. So we need to actually configure our beacons. And really, there are like 2 major parameters to set up on your beacons. One is advertising frequency, right? This, hey, I'm beacon number 7. Hey, I'm beacon number 7. Or, hey, I'm beacon number 7. Hey, I'm beacon number 7. And why is that important? Basically, iOS, when scanning for beacons, it does this in 1-second intervals. And those beacon pings, like the more frequently iOS will hear those beacon pings in those intervals, the more kind of accurate the distance calculations, something we'll dive deeper into later, are going to be. But also, you probably, like, say you set your advertising interval to 1 second, so 1 ping per 1 scan, and somebody actually covers your beacon or, walks past the beacon, and since human body actually absorbs Bluetooth signals pretty heavily, iOS actually loses this beacon for a second. And if it doesn't see it, like it considers it, hey, this beacon is no longer here, and it will trigger like, this user is actually outside the beacon range now, which is not true, right? So this is probably something you want to like play with it and just get it right. Of course, you could just set it to like the lowest possible value, but the drawback is the higher the frequency, right? The more the beacon advertises, the lower the battery life. So really, like, shoot for some middle ground. And this second parameter that I mentioned is broadcasting power, and this is really all about mostly range of the beacon, right? The power goes up, the beacon can be heard by the device further away. And again, like, technically you could, like, people ask us, hey, could you make beacons that transmit for like, that have a range of say 200 meters, right? Sure, we could do that, right? But you would need like to make it really big with a really huge battery in order to make that work. So is this really worth it? And again, like, the higher the power, the greater the range, but also the battery life suffers because of that. And like, there's this little small disclaimer here that sometimes greater power, greater like value of the power means better stability. And like, again, this is mostly because somebody walks past the beacon, right, absorbs the Bluetooth signal. If the power is stronger, then maybe some of it will still make it to the device, right? So the beacon won't actually disappear from iOS devices range like at all. It'll just like less of the actual signal will get it to the device. So those are like the 2 major points, and this is something Estimote specific. Some more configuration you can set for your beacons. This is something we called power modes. It's like not really the latest addition, but yeah, something we introduced a few months ago. Basically, some ways to actually improve the battery life. So yeah, that's basically coming back to the question about like, is battery really the problem with beacons? Yes, it is kind of a problem, but I would still say like the bigger problem is finding like the actual great use cases for beacons. Like that's the greatest problem here. So we have basic power mode, which increases battery life, but at the there always needs to be some drawback, right? You can't just increase your battery life and at no expense, pretty much. So here it comes at the expense of the connection time. That's also something we'll cover later. And we have the smart power mode, which is it improves your battery life, but at the expense of sometimes responsiveness of the beacon. And one more thing I kind of want to mention. This is one of the latest additions. So it's usually a good idea to iterate, right? So maybe you found the broadcasting power, advertising intervals, smart power modes settings for your beacon. You deployed your beacons, and then you're like, something doesn't work. Maybe we can actually change those settings, and it's going to be pretty painful to actually go around and reconfigure all those beacons. So right now you can go to cloud.estimote.com where we list all your beacons and change those settings remotely. And all you then need to do is go around with our Estimote app, and it will automatically upgrade all the beacons in the vicinity, right? So you basically enter the room, okay, all beacons updated, enter another room, all beacons updated, and well, it's still not ideal, right? Because you physically need to be in the room, but we're also working on that, so don't worry. Best practice number 2. People often ask us, hey, so what's this ideal setting for beacons? We have this use case, and just let us know what's advertising interval, broadcasting range, smart power modes we need to use. And we're like, well, we don't know, right? There is no one size fits. Oh, apparently I have a meeting in 5 minutes. Where were I? So yeah, there is no one size fits all when it comes to settings, and what you really need to do is test, right? So this is introducing some additional challenge to the whole app deployment, right? Because you not only need to actually think about developing your mobile app, but you also need to think about deployment of those beacons and test how this thing works in real world. So yeah, it's going to be harder than a regular software project, but we believe it's also going to be more rewarding, right? Your app will actually have this context that we're talking about so much. So yeah, so really just experiment, test. The great part about it is beacons are relatively new, but there is already a lot of deployments worldwide, and in many cases people actually share their experiences in blog posts, on forums, stuff like that. That's a really stubborn one. So for example, Brooklyn Museum deployed beacons quite some time ago, and then they wrote a really great blog post about all the things they tried, placing beacons on the walls, on the ceilings, experimenting with all the settings and all this stuff. And can I maybe get this back? Oh, the technology. Chris to the rescue. Cool. Let's proceed then. So yeah, we already know the basics, beacon regions, this is Bluetooth, whatever. We deployed our beacons, we experimented with the setup, we found our perfect advertising interval, broadcasting power, smart power modes, whatever. Time to actually add a smartphone to the mix, right, on our mobile applications. So let's talk a little about what you can do with your mobile application and beacons. So probably there are 2 major modes of interactions, and probably the most interesting one is called beacon monitoring, beacon region monitoring. What's really cool about it is that it works in the background. You can have your phone in the pocket, the screen turned off, locked, and it will still work. It will still monitor for beacons. And really, how it works is it's a little like a GPS geofence. So you designate an area through those beacon regions. So the area might be all the beacons in Estimote Museum, all the beacons in the North Wing, or a particular exhibit. And And the iOS will let you know whenever you enter or exit the range of the beacon, right? So somebody entered the northern wing, which basically means that the iOS device has heard some of the beacons from in the northern wing, and it will let like your application know. And same story, like the iOS doesn't no longer hears any beacons in the northern wing. That probably means the user actually exited this region. So yeah, really think about it as this digital geofence. And again, warning, developer mode. This is basically what you need to make it work. There is this start monitoring for region where you pass the region which you actually defined beforehand, and boom, did enter, did exit. These two methods will get called whenever you actually enter or exit this beacon geofence, if you will. But there is something more here, those permissions part. So if you think about it, it's like really about location, right? Whether I'm in the Estimote museum, in which wing, at which exhibit. So Apple takes like location data, location services, and privacy very seriously. So when they designed a beacon, they actually said, hey, the user needs to grant you permission to access those location data in order for your app to use beacons. So this is the addition in iOS 8. They basically split this into two modes. You can request access to location data whenever your app is actively being used on screen, so-called when in use mode, or there is also this always mode, which is basically, hey, this application can access information about your location data even when it's not running, like it's in the background. So since this is the case with beacon monitoring, right, I said it works when your app is like not running actively on screen, your phone is locked, your screen is turned off, we actually need to ask for this kind of permission. And here is the next best practice. So we already talked about like app onboarding and how to educate your users about Bluetooth Low Energy. So you should probably do the same with location services, right? If somebody downloads a museum guide and suddenly it starts asking for permissions to access your location even when the app is not running, like the red light might actually turn on. So there is this pretty common, you'll like see this app onboarding screen, right? It will actually explain you why. It will ask you for location services, to grant location services permissions in a second, and then you're like, okay, I've read it. Boom, here comes like the native pop-up from iOS, which actually asks you for these permissions. So yeah, make sure it's like understandable and that you're like clear about why you really need to access this data. One thing that comes sort of as a bonus in iOS 8 when you're doing beacon region monitoring is they added this little icon in, not sure if it's visible, in the left bottom corner of your lock screen. Like you used to have, like you're probably already used to the camera icon in the bottom right corner. Just you can swipe up and have a quick access to your camera. In iOS 8, they added the same icon for like suggested app, which is basically Apple's trying to guess which app matches the context of your current location and suggest you to use it, right? So maybe you're at Starbucks, hey, here is the Starbucks app. You're, I don't know, commuting, here is like an app that allows you to buy a ticket or something. So when you start monitoring for a beacon region, whenever you're inside that region, your app icon will actually be shown on the screen, right? So say our museum app is actually monitoring for all the beacons in Estimote Museum. Whenever we're actually in the Estimote Museum and the iOS device can hear those beacons, the icon for the museum will pop on the screen. On to another best practice. Again, like we get a lot of questions. There are some limitations to background monitoring. Like the one you will probably run into the most often is that you can only monitor up to 20 beacon regions on iOS at a time. And people all like usually ask us, hey, can we like work around it, or can we do more like in the background and all that stuff? And sure, there are some ways to work around it, but the real question you should be asking yourself is like, is this something you really want to do, right? In the end, most of the value when using application comes when the application is actually on screen, right? It's cool that we get a notification from Foursquare, hey, you're near this cool place, check out their, I don't know, special desserts or something like that. But really, like, the most value we get out of Foursquare is when we like actively want to browse through, I don't know, we're looking for a place to grab beer or drinks, and we actually actively use the application to do that, right? So yeah, don't overestimate the power of background monitoring. It's a really cool feature of beacons and iBeacon. But yeah, like, don't overestimate it and be responsible about it. So yeah, if not to overestimate it, then there must be something else. And yeah, there is like this another mode of operation with beacons, and that's called ranging. And this is something that is designed to be used when the app is actively in use on screen. And the really cool part about it is it not only provides you with like, hey, the user entered like the range of the beacon or exited the range of the beacon, entered the region or exited the region. It also gives you distance information about the beacon. So this is pretty cool, but again, take it with a like pinch of salt. Yeah, I actually have another best practice for that. How this distance calculation works is basically it takes like the strength of the signal and tries to approximate the distance from the device to the beacon based on that. But Bluetooth is like really a radio wave, right? 2.4 gigahertz radio wave, which is susceptible to many external factors, like we already talked about absorption, right? Yeah, it also bounces off walls and yeah, like there is really many things that can happen to this radio wave from the moment it left the beacon till the moment it actually arrived at your phone and your device. So yeah, basically take this distance measurement with a like pinch of salt, and make sure, this is again like something you probably achieve like with a lot of testing, that your app is pretty resilient to any fluctuations, right? So somebody walks past the beacon, suddenly the beacon is not 2 meters from us, but 3 meters from us, right? Something like that. Or maybe we lose it at all because like 4 people are actually on like between our device and the beacon, right? And iOS can't see it anymore. So yeah, think about it. And this is how you use ranging. Again, like really simple. Instead of start monitoring, we use start ranging. We don't have did enter, did exit. We have did range beacons, and this is something that will be called every second. So basically, those 1 second scan periods I was talking about earlier. So yeah, like at the end of each scan period, you will get a call to this did range beacons with a list of beacons that were found in range, plus like the information about the approximated distance. And since this is like designed to be used mostly when the app is on screen, we actually only need the when in use permission to access location services data. So yeah, that's pretty much like the basics you need to know to start tinkering with beacons. But I think there is some more cool stuff that is worth mentioning. Yeah, mostly like when I was talking about the software solutions. So this is another software solution Estimote has, Estimote Cloud. Basically one place in which you can see all your beacons with like their current settings, estimated like remaining battery life. You can manage their settings with remote fleet management, our newest addition. But I want to talk about one not really that well discovered feature of Estimote SDK, but I actually think that it's pretty cool, and it actually solves many problems. You can basically fetch a list of your beacons from Estimote Cloud, and well, yeah, you can do it either with like our iOS SDK. It'll take care of all the like server calls for you, or you can like use our REST API, also a new addition. And why would you need that? That's because I encourage you to follow another good practice. Make it easy for yourselves. Use abstractions, not majors and minors. So sometimes people ask us, yeah, well, like the battery in this particular beacon, say at an exhibit A died, or somebody stole it, or yeah, something like that. And yeah, what now? If you had like majors and minors hard-coded into your application, it's going to be hard. If you had it on external server, it's a little bit easier. But really, why do all that when you can like go to Estimote Cloud, name your beacon or to your own content management system, right? It doesn't need to be Estimote Cloud. Estimote Cloud is probably the easiest one because you don't actually need to build a content system for yourself. In Estimote Cloud, you can basically name your beacons. Say, yeah, this is like Exhibit A beacon, and then you can like download this list from our servers, and only then, like in your app, you can, hey, so this is a beacon which is currently assigned to Exhibit A, and here are its majors and minors. So let's use that for actually ranging and monitoring or whatever else you want to do with beacon regions. So yeah, try to build some kind of an abstraction over like that. This is mostly useful for like large-scale deployments. Of course, if you only have like 3 beacons, that would be probably an unnecessary overhead. But yeah, think about it. And you can do more with beacons. So and here we're actually diving into like sort of Estimote specific stuff. This is no longer iBeacon. iBeacon is mostly about like your phone receiving some stuff from the beacon, but you can also go the other way, right? You can pair your device with a beacon because it's a regular Bluetooth device, right? You can connect to it and do some interesting things there. But since most of those like interesting things are actually like pretty sensitive actions, like for example changing your beacon's configuration, this is something that will require you to basically authorize yourself as the owner of the beacon, right? We don't want somebody changing settings of your beacons just because they can connect to it without authorizing themselves. So authorize yourself with like app ID and app token, connect to the beacon, and the connection is the asynchronous process. So if it succeeds, if it fails, you will get a notification to your delegate about it. And what you can do when you're connected to the beacon, right? So yeah, one thing is you can change your configuration, and this might be useful, especially if you're like building an app, which is we're like really seeing like 2 kind of use cases for beacons. One is like when a particular venue actually wants to use them for a certain purpose. So they will usually like configure them themselves, deploy them, write an app. It works, everyone's happy. But maybe you want to write an app that is like designated for some kind of end user, like regular Joe at home. I don't know, something that turns on their Philips Hue lights, or just an example here. And then you probably want to make it as easy as possible for them. So maybe you want your app to take care of like beacon configurations for them, right? So they only provide your app with those authorization credentials, and your app actually takes care of setting like the range and advertising interval and all that other stuff. But you can also tap into some additional sensors that our beacons are equipped with, and this is like the thermometer and accelerometer. Thermometer is really easy, right? You just read the temperature. Accelerometer, yeah, you can basically get an information if the beacon is currently moving or not, either by reading a property or getting a call to a delegate. But something pretty cool is like this accelerometer count. So say you have your beacon on, I don't know, 2 entrances to your museum, and like on the actual doors, and you can read how many times the particular beacon was in motion. So maybe this will give you some data, which entrance is like more popular, which you should like use to expose some advertising more, or yeah, basically here like comes your creativity and whatever you want to do with it. Yeah, almost wrapping it up. So this is something I kind of like to think about from time to time when I have nothing else better to do. Imagine like we have this museum, right? And it has beacons installed, and just like, I don't know, like with consumer, like, yeah, web products, for example, right now, most of them actually expose API for developers to sort of tap into those products and maybe do some cool stuff. I don't know, think Trello, Basecamp, something like that. think like if this museum actually had a sort of API section on its page where it actually provided you with a list of all the beacons deployed in the museum, their UUIDs, majors, minors, and all those things. Then we can have like competing apps built, like a Peter's Guide to Estimote Museum or Pablo's Guide to Estimote Museum, because they can actually tap into like this sort of a public infrastructure, beacon infrastructure, and maybe build like this guide and that guide, and then the end user can actually choose which one is better. So yeah, I like to think of that as an API for the real world. But it's also a dangerous world, and sure, there's like a lot of cool stuff we can do with it, right? Like, yeah, open API for a museum. But like, let's imagine this another use case. We have an Awesome Mart and we have Better Mart. And Awesome Mart deployed like beacons in their own stores. They like took a lot of effort and money to actually get it right and all this stuff. And now they have an Awesome Mart app, which provides customers with like guidance throughout the shop and maybe some discounts, promotions, something like that. But Better Mart has actually like it's pretty easy to sort of sniff those UUIDs, majors and minors, and they built a competing app that taps into Awesome Mart's beacon infrastructure, and whenever a customer is at Awesome Mart, they actually get a notification from the Better Mart's app, which is like, hey, looking at vegetables, we have them more fresh and cheaper, come to us. So yeah, it's a dangerous world, and this is why we actually introduced Secure UID. Again, this is like Estimote specific thing. So something that basically enables you to secure your UID. So it's like, well, technically it wouldn't be correct if I said it's impossible to sniff it. You can still sniff it, but since it's like rotating every certain interval, it's really hard to actually really explore like your infrastructure. If you don't know like the UID major and minor, you can't actually tap into this beacon infrastructure. So Better Mart is like suddenly like just goes deaf, doesn't hear any beacons, or like hears some random beacons that keep changing their UIDs all the time. But yeah, like since we have like a sort of think of it as a secure token on the beacon and inside the Awesome Mart's app, because that's the one authorized to use this beacon infrastructure, Awesome Mart can actually take those secure UIDs, which are like seemingly random, and convert them into actual UIDs and use them as always. So yeah, wrapping up pretty much. I encourage you to, yeah, pretty much experiment. I don't know. Somebody here already doing something with beacons? Yeah, the guys will talk about later. So yeah, like really, the hardest part is probably coming up with a use case, and I actually want to take a moment here and say that. Think about this example, right? And basically, what I'm driving at is like, try to give customers better brains, not longer hands. So sure, you could like build an app which enables you to like turn on and off your lights. You're sitting on a couch, you pull up an app, and hey, turn the light on, turn the light off, like dim it, make it brighter, something like that, right? But it's not really cool. It is essentially a longer hand, because we could just get up off the couch and turn the light on or off ourselves. But if you were to like build an app which enables you, like which actually knows that you're inside the room or you're moving between rooms, like this is essentially a better brain, right? Or an app that automatically adjusts your air conditioning system based on like the external conditions and whether it's like late in the night and you're sleeping, so let's make it colder, or not, so let's make it warmer, and something like that. So yeah, like think about like the possible use cases, but have this one thing in mind, right? Try to like aim for better brains, not longer hands. So yeah, you can learn more about like the Estimote offer on estimote.com, buy a dev kit if you want to experiment with it. GitHub.com/Estimote, you've already seen this. Look into our SDKs. We have like iOS, Android, indoor location, which Namika already talked about as well. And I also encourage you to visit, like, we have an amazing community of Beacon developers, forums, knowledge base. So this is pretty great, because it's still a pretty young technology and there are some like challenges. because of that. But yeah, like we already gathered a pretty solid knowledge base and like a base of like questions and answers and people trying to help each other. So yeah, if you need help, community.estimote.com is the way to go. Thanks.